Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. This week on the show, we have the UAP Task Force report and To the Stars conspiracy. I'm your host and researcher for the week, Dennis Cheney, joined as always by my magnificent, I don't know what to call you this week, Patrick. Patrick Ryan, how are you doing?
Well, I mean, I was all right until you couldn't decide whether you're going to be mean or nice to me. And so you just went ambivalent with it and just chose nothing. That's okay. My feelings aren't hurt. It's all right.
I'm up in the air, man. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This week's a pretty current event episode. And I want to remind everyone to like, share, subscribe, send this to a friend, leave us some comments, tell us some stuff you want us to look into. We're rounding out. This is the last show of June. It's been a great month. We keep growing, and we want to thank you all. So, Patrick, you have any announcements before we get started?
I guess want to thank everybody that's been commenting on YouTube and stuff. Like, those have been really, I appreciate the positive comments. It makes me feel good. So thank you for that. Keep them coming.
Well, I apologize that I didn't have a positive comment or title for you this week.
Somebody's got to drag me down every week. I know. That's like your whole goal in life is somebody has to hurt Patrick every week, whether it's you or somebody else. Somebody has to hurt Patrick.
It's my job. Patrick, are you ready to get into the UAP Task Force report?
I mean, we've been talking about this for feels like most of the show, like waiting for this to finally come to fruition. So
we really have, and we've been talking about. I mean, this is, I think, our second show was Nimitz.
Third was Nimitz.
Our second or third show was Nimitz. Yeah. And that's going to play into this somewhat. Now, this week, I'll tell you what, I got into this thinking, ooh, that report's going to release on Friday. We're just going to go through the report. And then Friday ran around like a little kid at Christmas. I went and I found the report, and we'll see how you feel about it. But it sparked my interest in a completely different direction. And we'll get into that today as well.
I mean, I think we both kind of, I don't know if we've mentioned it on the show, but just us talking, like, we both just kind of assume, like, this is, like, other things that have happened recently with, like, disclosure is probably going to be a sort of a letdown.
Well, we'll see if you think it's a letdown.
Okay.
I don't think the show will be a letdown. I don't think the show.
No, I don't mean that. I just mean, like, the way they kind of skirt around stuff. Yeah, like.
And you basically nailed it. We'll go through it, but I want the people who are listening who may have already read it or who know that we're going to get into some other things that are related to it here.
Okay.
So I want to start out with a timeline of how this new disclosure movement basically got started.
Okay. And
in the modern era, kind of like the after 9/11 era, I think it can be traced to around 2007. And that's when the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was founded by our military.
Okay.
Now,
I don't feel like I've heard of that before.
Go ahead.
I don't feel like I've heard of that before.
You probably have in passing, but it kind of melds into the UAP Task Force as well.
Okay.
And some other things. Now, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was founded in 2007, and it was officially disbanded in 2012.
And you're going to tell me they've done nothing with it ever since then, right? Because that's the way it always works when they disband something is
right.
That all stops, obviously.
Exactly. So it was headed by a man named Luis Elizondo, which should sound interesting. We haven't talked about him or should sound familiar.
He has something to do with the To the Stars Academy, right?
Yes, he does.
Okay, I was like, that name does sound familiar. I think we did talk about him, or I brought him up in my research in the Nimitz report.
Yes, you did. So Elizondo was the head of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and prior to that, he was a U.S. Army counterintelligence special agent and spent 20 years in the basically intelligence community. And he does some crazy stuff. Even if you just read his Wikipedia, which I'm sure is like the vanilla stuff. Oh, he was into like drug cartels, post 9/11, just like crazy everything.
Yeah, he was all over the place.
So he resigned famously from the Department of Defense in 2017 to, quote, protest government secrecy when it came to UFOs. And he joined the To the Stars Academy shortly thereafter in October of 2017.
Yeah, it is, and I think I talked about it some during that Nimitz episode. Like, it's a very you kind of wonder what happened that caused. I mean, he's been in this his whole life, so obviously he's been seeing some of this. Like, I wonder, like, what was going on internally that suddenly made him like switch gears and decide to start outing things that he had previously probably helped keep secret.
Exactly. And officially, I mean, like if you read newspaper reports, he's often described as a whistleblower.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ironically enough, he's one of the first whistleblowers the government really has done nothing about. You know what I mean? His his title at To the Stars Academy is Director of Government Programs and Services.
Okay.
So around this time, late October 2017, this is when actually Elizondo with the To the Stars Academy released the very first 3 official videos of the Tic Tac UFOs.
And who would have thought, as a teenager listening to Blink 182, that guy was going to be the guy that was going to tell us all about some UFO stuff?
Tom DeLonge, I know. Who would have thought? We'll get into Tom a little bit here.
It makes me very optimistic for like my career and just us in general. Is like, man, you can really make some like hard right turns out of things. And
you can. Yeah, later in life. And for those who don't know, the To the Stars Academy was founded by Tom DeLonge, and we'll get into them.
And he was the lead. Was he the lead singer of Blink 182?
And the lead singer of Blink 182. Yeah, exactly. So late 2017, they released the videos that are now going to become the Tic Tac videos from the USS Nimitz and the USS Theodore Roosevelt. And there has been lots of media exposure then around both To the Stars Academy and Elizondo. And he's faced some criticism for kind of being like a media darling.
Mm-hmm.
Famously, earlier in 2021, he told Tucker Carlson on Fox News that the U.S. had pieces of a UFO and then quickly invoked his security oath so he wouldn't have to say much longer. And he kind of does stuff like that. He'll dangle stuff out there and then he'll take a step back. And it is, I mean, yeah, what would motivate? I mean, technically, I mean, officially he's a whistleblower. So I guess he got sick of the secrecy. He thinks it's a big deal. The public should know. And he's also been quoted, however, as actually kind of blowing the whistle on his little project itself, saying that the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program actually did not end in 2012.
Shocking.
Shocking.
I am shocked right now, Dennis. That is not at all what I expected to hear.
Now, I found this interesting, though. So he says that the reason the Pentagon says that is that's the date the government stopped funding it.
So they're using like Black Ops, COINTELPRO style things. Where were we delivering cocaine to in this decade to fund this project?
Well, you know who he says funded it for the next basically 5 years till he quit?
Who?
Just quote, Navy and CIA officials continue to support the program, and he believes even after his resignation.
Good. So even the official people have like slush fund budgets so they can just kind of direct where they want. Excellent. Perfect.
Yeah, it sounds like it's literally a Black Ops. They say it doesn't exist the minute it's off the books, but it keeps existing like everything else. Now, the timing here is interesting. He actually, Elizondo says he believes it still exists, or he knows that it still exists after his resignation. So he left in October of 2017. In December, just 2 months later, the Department of Defense acknowledged the existence of another program designed to collect data on military UFO sightings called the UAP Task Force. Interesting timing. Yeah. And like its predecessor, it is managed by the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and the Office of Naval Intelligence. I've always wondered, like, why is the Navy the one that's always involved in UAP?
Well, I mean, the more we talk about things flying in and out of the ocean, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
they got the submarines and stuff.
Yeah.
It's also cool that, like, we shut down a project, but then the new project literally has the same boss running it as the old one, right?
Well, the same agencies.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily the undersecretary that was running the one that was up until 2012. That might.
Well, that's who was over it.
Yeah.
But Elizondo was like running the project.
Okay.
But it's interesting that just 2 months after he left the one, they acknowledged the existence of the other. I mean, it's a very fast series of events. He quits. He blows the whistle. They release 3 videos, and then within a month after that, the Pentagon for the first time acknowledges, okay, we have this program. It really all happened very quickly. That was a very exciting 2 or 3 months, like in UFO stuff. And in my view, it might be a little bit suspicious.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like maybe they were trying to get ahead of something.
Yeah, that's
Like
one. That's one
if
interpretation.
Elizondo is going to tell everybody anyway, it would look better for us if we did it instead of looking like we're getting exposed or whatever.
That's one interpretation, but keep in mind, like I said earlier, he's not the only whistleblower. He's
Yeah,
not the only person who said there's more here. I mean, they hold people to their security oaths. You know, they might off people. We don't know, but they seem to be like very hands off of Elizondo.
that
Um,
is curious.
so ever since that very exciting 3 months at the end of 2017, we've had this drip, drip, drip kind of information. We've had new videos. We often report on them here. We've had news earlier this year, I believe, about advanced materials being in
Yeah.
the uh, U.S. Army's possession.
Yeah, we found crashed vehicles or whatever that we have
Right.
pieces from, and that we don't understand what it's made out of and whatnot.
And I would say some have basically called the last 3 years basically disclosure, that we have reached an age of disclosure. And now it's happening slowly, but it's basically happened. We've said there are these craft and we don't know where they're coming from.
It is a very big leap and change of pace compared to the last 80 years where they've been calling everybody liars and crazy and conspiracy theorists. To
And
then
it
go,
also,
oh yeah, those guys. Then they come out and be like, you know what? So those weren't really conspiracy. This kind of been going on, you guys. I know we made everybody think those people were crazy. We're not going to apologize for that or try and fix any of that. But here you go.
right. And it's not, yeah, it's just very bizarre. Like, there's the idea that we keep saying on this show, like they're trying to get ahead of something. Something's going to happen. They know it's going to happen. They
That's
want
what
to
it
get us,
feels like.
they want to get us prepared. I kind of have a different alternative theory we'll get into in this episode.
Okay.
Now, we've had the drip, 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 and all of this came to a head in July 2020 when Senator Marco Rubio of Florida led the charge in the Senate Intelligence Committee and began sounding an alarm that UFOs or UAP could represent a national security threat. And some more news dripped out throughout 2020. And finally, in December of 2020, an intelligence and defense spending bill signed by President Trump gave the military 180 days to produce a report on what it knows about UFOs. And that 180 days was up at the end of June, and we have the report. You ready to get into it, man?
Let's get into it.
All right. So I have the PDF here. We're going to link to it. It's really short. It is 9 pages if you include the title page and the 2 appendixes. So it's about 6. It's about 6 pages, and not all of the pages are even all the way full. It's.
I mean, we read a lot of like declassified stuff like this on the show, and they're not generally that short. Some of them are. There are some short stuff, but they're usually part of a bigger collection of things. Like this is its own like supposed to be the culmination of all this. It seems kind of short. I'm gonna let you tell me about it.
It kind of seems like they when you have a book report or something to do, or like you have done the research but you haven't sat down and wrote it, and then you got to like pump it all out like in the last week or something like that. Is
This seems like more of a night before sort of thing.
yeah. So
Oh, it has been 108. We got to get that report done. All right, get somebody on that right now. Like.
This is from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. It's dated the 25th of June, 2021, and it's entitled The Preliminary Assessment Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. Now, the first section goes into scope and assumptions. For scope, it says this preliminary report is provided to the Office of the ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, in response to the provision in the Senate Report 116233 accompanying the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021. That's basically the bill that gave them 180 days. This report provides an overview for policymakers of the challenges associated with characterizing the potential threat posed by UAP, while also providing a means to develop relevant processes, policies, technologies, and training of the U.S. military and other U.S. government personnel if and when they encounter UAP. That's the first thing that threw up a red flag is what other U.S. personnel outside of the military would encounter a UFO?
I mean, I guess you could think maybe politicians.
I guess.
Like the president, high-ranking members of cabinets. I don't know, maybe governors if you're doing something specific in a state and you maybe don't want the rest of the country. I don't know.
So the director of the UAPTF, the task force, is the accountable official for ensuring the timely collection and consolidation of data on UAP. The data set described in this report is currently limited primarily to U.S. government reporting of incidents occurring from November 2004 to March of 2021. Data continues to be collected and analyzed. I wonder if they're going to do a follow-up report.
Yeah, I mean, with this one being called the preliminary, it does kind of seem like a primer.
It does. And this is not even the whole thing. So, various, under assumptions, it says various forms of sensors that register UAP generally operate correctly and capture enough real data to allow initial assessments, but some UAP may be attributable to sensor anomalies.
Okay.
Now, the executive summary. The limited amount of high quality reporting on UAP hampers our ability to draw firm conclusions about the nature or intent of UAP. The UAP Task Force considered a range of information on UAP described in the U.S. military and intelligence community reporting. But because the reporting lacks sufficient specificity, ultimately recognized that a unique, tailored reporting process was required to provide sufficient data for analysis of UAP events. So as a result, they limited this to 2004 to 2021. It states that most of the UAP reported probably do represent physical objects, given that a majority of the UAP were registered across multiple sensors to include radar, infrared, electro-optical, weapon seekers, and visual observation. In a limited number of incidents, UAP reportedly appeared to exhibit unusual flight characteristics. These observations could be the result of sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misperception and require additional rigorous analysis. There are probably multiple types of UAP, requiring different explanations based on the range of appearances and behavior described in the available reporting. Our analysis of the data supports the construct that if and when individual UAP incidents are resolved, they will fall into one of 5 potentially explanatory categories. 1, airborne clutter.
Okay. I'm going to let you finish this list before I say anything.
Okay. 2, natural atmospheric phenomenon, the classic. 3, U.S. government or U.S. industry development programs. So number 3 is us. Number 4, foreign adversary systems. And 5, the catch-all or other bin.
Okay. I mean, that's okay. Well, let's see. So we got airborne clusters. Clutter. So that's like stuff falling off of airplanes. I don't think what I saw in the Nimitz encounter was something falling off a plane. It definitely wasn't atmospheric because several pilots saw it, as well as it being picked up on sensors. I guess maybe it could be a secret development program, but at this point, with as much as happening, you would think there would be some communication, especially since things are getting disclosed.
Yeah.
For an adversary, that's a strong possible. I love that the last one though is just like other. So that's the one that we can't explain. We're just going to call that one other.
That's the aliens, and they call it other.
Yeah.
Now, the UAP clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to U.S. national security. Safety concerns primarily center on aviators contending with an increasingly cluttered air domain. UAP would also represent a national security challenge if there are foreign adversary collection platforms or provide evidence of a potential adversary has developed either a breakthrough or disruptive technology. Consistent consolidation of reports from across the federal government, standardized reporting, increased collection and analysis, and a streamlined process for screening all such reports against a broad range of relevant U.S. government data will allow for a more sophisticated analysis of UAP that is likely to deepen our understanding. Some of these steps are resource intensive and would require additional investment. You people have been studying this for decades. This task force existed long before Congress told you to write a report. Before that was Elizondo's aerial threat organization that was his predecessor. Before that, there was probably something else. The gist of this entire report is we don't have enough information and we need more money and time and better procedures to like figure stuff out.
Shocking.
It is
Shocking. We
so
don't have enough
disappointing.
money. We don't have enough money. Okay. Okay. Man, that's like
It's
a really lame excuse.
well, money, standardized procedures, time, I guess, more coordination. Which I mean, I would like the government to coordinate. That's part of the problem with these black projects, though, and part of the reason I'm going to be so mad if these crypto terrestrials or extraterrestrials ever do mean us harm is we've had all this time to talk about it and work on it, and it's all been kept so secret. So, um,
I
we're
mean, at
actually
least we're, acting exactly how you would expect humans to act about it. Really.
yes, exactly. So we'll go through the rest of this data. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but we'll go through the main highlights. Again, it's very short, and we'll include the link. In their available reporting, their first headline here is available reporting is largely inconclusive. Limited data leaves most UAP unexplained. Now, in this one, they again repeat that they are not going into a lot of cases here. They're limited to 2004 through 2021. Also, they don't have a standardized mechanism until one was for reporting until one was established by the Navy in March of 2019. So that kind of hampers this is a lot of excuses. Now, in this report, though, they basically say that they are reviewing 144 reports that all originate from US government sources. Of these 144, 80 reports involved observation with multiple sensors. So we know that it's not a sensor error. Most reports described UAP as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activity. They then go into a segment called UAP collection challenges, where they say socio-cultural stigmas and sensor limitations remain obstacles to collecting data on UAP. So there's technical challenges, and there's also the fact that when people see these things, they don't want to report it. They also say that the sensors mounted on US military platforms are typically designed to fulfill specific missions. As a result, those sensors are not generally suited for identifying UAP, and sensor vantage points and the number of sensors concurrently observing an object play substantial roles in distinguishing UAP from known objects and determining whether a UAP demonstrates breakthrough aerospace capabilities.
Well, that's all fine, but I mean, so are we doubting all the actual pilots' eyesight at this point then? Because there's a bunch of them that have come out and said like they saw it with their own eyes. They chased them, they did things like that. Like I
Yeah, well, that's another problem. The third thing is reputational risk is what keeps people silent. Basically, and this is kind of a little bit exciting. I'm trying to grab everything I can out of this because so many people have said this is so disappointing. And it is disappointing because we all wanted this big report where they're like, oh, this is the technology we have and this is where we think they're from. And we kind of knew in our heart of hearts we weren't going to get it. But it sounds like what they want to do is start building technology specifically to track these things.
okay.
Because right now they're saying, well, one problem we have is we're picking them up on our radar that we're using to hunt submarines or Russian MiGs. We haven't built something that's just to get UFOs. And
Okay.
so it's kind of interesting that they might be moving in a direction where they want funding or something, perhaps, to build like special radar that does nothing but look for UFOs. In fact, if you guys want to Google it, there's kind of a theory that one of those is being built in Florida right now.
Hmm.
There's like this gigantic tower that
Well, you would think with all the satellites we have and everything that there's nothing that can be used for this.
but
Okay.
again, those satellites were probably built to spy on the USSR or to keep track of other satellites that move in certain directions. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
definitely, unless it's in the black world, we don't have anything that we built to say, like, this is our UFO finder. So it kind of makes sense that we wouldn't have a lot of information. But they say some potential patterns do emerge. Although there is a wide variability in the reports and the data set's currently too limited for detailed trend and pattern analysis, there was some clustering of UAP observations regarding shape, size, and particularly propulsion. UAP sightings also tend to cluster around U.S. training and testing grounds, but we assess that this may result from a collection bias as a result of focused attention, greater numbers of latest generation sensors operating in those areas, unit expectations, and guidance to report anomalies. And that makes sense. Although I still think they are clustered around our military.
Yeah, I
guess
mean,
the
they do
military
seem to
does.
pay a lot of attention there. Whatever it is does seem to
Mhm.
focus around that, and like nuclear facilities, as we talked about. They're
Right. They'll
very
shut down a
interested in,
missile.
yeah,
Yeah, but they'll never like shut down a coal plant. Like
no,
they tend to be interested in the military.
yeah.
In 18 incidents described in 21 reports, observers reported unusual UAP movement patterns and flight characteristics. And this is under the subtitle, A Handful of UAP Appear to Demonstrate Advanced Technology. Some of these UAP appear to remain stationary in winds aloft, moving against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems process radio frequency energy associated with the UAP sightings. I'd like to know what those frequencies sound like. We
Mm-hmm.
probably never will. The task force holds a small amount of data that appeared to show UAP demonstrating acceleration or a degree of signature management. Additional rigorous analysis are necessary by multiple teams or groups of technical experts to determine the nature and validity of these data. We are conducting further analysis to determine if breakthrough technologies were demonstrated. Then we get into the UAP probably lack a single explanation topic. And this is where they get into all their definitions. Again, clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena. In the clutter section, they list birds, balloons, airborne debris like plastic bags. They list plastic bags as that to me is thumbing their nose at us. Like that's the
Yeah,
new swamp gas.
yeah, yeah.
That's
To
my
all these things you've listed so far, actually, like, okay, that does remind me of swamp gas. Yeah,
but plastic bags. I mean, can you imagine a fighter pilot track something and they say over an
there's a
aircraft carrier
Walmart
and they
bag
say
doing some crazy maneuvers over here, you guys.
it could be a plastic bag. Although, do you remember? I'll get into this. It's a personal story. Do you remember the night I called you and I thought there was some creature crawling across my lawn and it was a
Yes,
plastic bag?
yes, I do remember that.
Anyway, the next one is natural atmospheric phenomena, the classic, including ice crystals, moisture, and other things that may register on infrared systems.
Mm.
This is USG or Industrial Development Programs. This is us. They say it could be attributable to us. I like how we're just like open about how dark our programs are now, where the military itself can release a report and be like, if it's us, we may never know.
Yeah, that's that builds confidence in the whole system, doesn't it?
It's the Antarctica people, I think, is what that's code for.
Maybe.
Foreign adversary systems, mainly China or Russia, is what they're worried about. And oddly enough, they have non-governmental entity listed as a foreign adversary, like Al Qaeda basically would have a UFO, which would be very concerning.
Well, yeah. It seems unlikely, but yeah, that would be concerning.
Then they get into the other category, which is where we'll put all our alien hopes. And they basically say this group would be such objects in this category pending scientific advancements that allowed us to better understand them. They basically say we're not even going to get into what that might be.
So the most interesting ones probably we're not really going to talk about too much, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. Here's some interesting highlights. UAP threaten flight safety and possibly national security. They say that in 11 of these reports, the pilots documented near misses with the objects.
Those Walmart bags will sneak up on you, man.
I know. They say we continue to monitor for evidence of such programs of our military adversaries, given the counterintelligence challenge they would pose, particularly as some UAP have been detected near military facilities or by aircraft carrying the United States government's most advanced sensor systems. Then they go into one of their final parts saying explaining the UAP will require analytic collection and resource investment. So give us money, basically.
That's what I'm hearing.
Their major things here are: one, standardize the reporting, consolidate the data, and deepen the analysis. They say the task force has begun to develop interagency analytical and processing workflows to ensure both collection and analysis will be well informed and coordinated. The majority of UAP data is from the U.S. Navy reporting, but efforts are underway to standardize incident reporting across the U.S. military. The UAP Task Force is currently working to acquire additional reporting from the U.S. Air Force and from the Federal Aviation Administration, which would be interesting. Their second category is we need to expand collection. They say the task force is looking for novel ways to increase collection of UAP cluster areas when the U.S. forces are not present, and a way to baseline, quote, standard UAP activity and mitigate the collection bias in the data set. One proposal is to use advanced algorithms to search historical data captured and stored by radars. That would be interesting if they could figure out a way to do that.
Yeah.
The UAP Task Force also plans to update its current interagency UAP collection strategy in order to bring to bear relevant collection platforms and methods from the DoD and the IC. And that's kind of what I was getting to earlier. It sounds like they want to start building stuff just to look for the UFOs. And finally, increased investment in research and development. This one, Patrick, is going to come up in our next section. The UAP Task Force has indicated that additional funding for research and development could further the future study of the topics laid out in this report. Such investment could be guided by the UAP collection strategy, UAP R&D technical roadmap, and the UAP program plan.
So basically, their report that's taken them all this time to put out is just like, hey, we don't know. You should give us some money and we'll try and figure it out. Maybe if you give us enough money, but I don't know. Just give us some money and, we'll talk again in like a year.
Well, I'm intrigued because what exactly is the UAP R&D technical roadmap and program plan? Are we going to build our own? Are we going to try to build this stuff? You know what I mean? Like, is this getting into the, was it Salvador Paez, the UFO Navy patents?
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I mean, that's kind of what it sounds like. I mean, just from what we've heard about them, like discovering, new materials and stuff that they're trying to mess with in these crash, which is weird because they've said they found crash stuff that we don't know what it is. How is that not in this report?
Yeah,
how is that not something to go off of? Like, you can narrow it down to a foreign nation, our government, or something unknown, but that's not a Walmart bag, or swamp gas, or ice crystals. Like, definitively, that should have gotten its own like category. Stuff we've actually found.
Now they have
pictures of it.
They have to do this systematically, so I'm sure. But I will say one thing in this report is out of the 144, do you know how many they explained?
How many?
One.
Oh, cool. I mean, they only had like 6 months to do it, Dennis. So, I mean, that makes sense.
So they have all these categories, and I think the one was actually a censor error.
Perfect.
And so that's the report. That's the kind of disappointing, a little bit tantalizing report. Is basically we need money for our R&D and strategies to like counteract these things, basically, or at least to study them.
Yeah, this is not satisfying.
It was not. But keep in mind, on Wednesday, the 16th of June, this is not the full report. There's actually a top secret segment that they left out of it.
Okay, so that's where all the good stuff is.
Yeah, and the good stuff was reported to Congress on Wednesday, the 16th in June. It was reported to the House Intelligence Committee, where they were taken to a super secure facility for quite some time.
To talk about Walmart bags flying around in the sky.
To get into the more top secret area. And who knows, maybe we make fun of this thing being like 6 pages. Maybe it's actually like 200 pages, and this is all they can tell us.
They're going to give us, yeah.
Do you want to hear some quotes from the New York Post? Actually talked to some of the House members when they came out of the briefing.
Yes, please.
So Representative Andre Carson, Democrat of Indiana, said, "We're looking forward to having a public hearing at some point. There's some national security concerns that we want to take into consideration." Representative Adam Schiff, a Democrat of California and chair of the House Intelligence Committee, said it was an interesting briefing. I did learn things that were certainly new to me, but I think I'm going to leave it at that. Mike Quigley. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. All right, so you're just teasing us. They're just teasing at this point. Like I know something, but I can't tell you.
I know. Mike Quigley of Illinois said the stigma is gone now, and that's a big change in policy as I've witnessed in my lifetime. So the fact that they're taking this sort of thing seriously for the first time is important.
Yes, but I think they've been secretly taking it as a serious thing for a while now. So serious that they wanted to make everybody else feel crazy for thinking it was real at all.
Exactly. And I wonder how much the Intelligence Committee even knew or how much of a ride they're getting taken for.
Yeah.
So Representative Patrick Maloney, Democrat in New York, said, we take the issue of UAP seriously to the extent that we're dealing with the safety and security of the U.S. military personnel or the national security interests of the U.S., so we want to know what we're dealing with. I think it's important to understand that there are legitimate questions involving safety and security of our personnel and in operations and in our sensitive activities. And we all know that there's a proliferation of technologies out there. We need to understand the space a little better. And then finally, I'll leave you with two other ones. Representative Quigley from Illinois again. Who said that this is one of the most exciting changes of things this is one of the biggest changes. He left off by saying, if I had to predict how the public will react to this, one word would be disappointing. Mm-hmm. Peter Welch, Democrat of Vermont, gave a similar assessment saying, quote, I'm not on the edge of my seat.
Okay. This is kind of a mixed bag of representative reactions here.
Well, none of them were like blown away. They just said this is important. We haven't talked about it before. It might be a national security risk. They all say what the public report says.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think that's maybe they got told to underplay it to some extent, maybe, or they already knew most of this stuff as a security commission or whatever.
I kind of feel like if they were taken to a super secret location, I'm sure that's how they do all this stuff, and they came out and said the public's going to be disappointing. I feel like they were told some stuff that we're not being told, and they were told, like, you might as well just say that they'd be disappointed because they're going to be disappointed in what we tell them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But so we're past the disappointing part, and now I want to get to the bum you out part.
Oh, great.
Or intrigue you part.
Okay.
So far, we're all very disappointed in this.
Yeah.
There's Elizondo, our media darling, has weighed in on this report as well. And I'll read a headline here from, I believe it was the Daily Mail. Pentagon is accused of a cover-up after its highly anticipated UFO report leaves out the, quote, top secret section, and DoD whistleblower claims there's a lot more than 144 incidents. Luis Elizondo, the former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program to study UFOs, said the report was only the tip of the iceberg, but nevertheless called it historic. Elizondo said that it was important to consider all possibilities, including extraterrestrial, or transdimensional origin.
That's freaky.
Yeah.
Which we've kind of poked around at some of that stuff too. Like, maybe that's part of what's happening.
We have. And the fact that it's coming out of Elizondo's mouth to me says
that might be a thing.
Yeah. He says, Elizondo says, this is something that could involve outer space, interspace, or the space in between. And that's why we always said, keep all options on the table. The more we learn about this remarkable universe we live in, the more we realize our current understanding of the construct of the cosmos is constantly changing and evolving with new information and new knowledge that we get. People jump to speculation that it's from Pleiades or something like that, when in fact, one of the hypotheses when I was at the AATIP was this could be as natural to Earth as we are, but we're just at a point where technologically we aren't advanced enough. We are advanced enough we can collect information on it and begin to try to figure out what it is. There's been another hypothesis that these things are possibly from underwater, and as outlandish as it may seem, there's some anecdotal evidence that supports all of these observations. So what we want to do is try to get as much data on the table as we can before we start eliminating options, he said. And he also came out and said that 144 is not true. There's way more government sightings than this.
I'm sure. I mean, there's been way there. I mean, just I think we were talking about it last year, how there was more than that in New York in 2019 alone. Like New York was at an all-time, given that's not all military, but just
Right.
reported sightings.
They limited this specifically to military because that's what's in their control. Now, into a little bit more of my independent research diving here, Patrick.
Okay.
So at the beginning of this, I told you to pay special attention to how weird I think it is that Elizondo left his program in October 2017. The 3 videos were released, and then this task force, which finally gave us a report 4 years later, finally gave us anything substantive on paper 4 years later, despite all the little leaks, was announced in December of 2017. Mm-hmm. I want to go into a little bit of a very small timeline of some significant things that a lot of people might not know about the To the Stars Academy. It was founded in 2017, shortly before Elizondo came on board.
Yep.
But did you know that Tom DeLonge actually wrote a UFO book that was published in 2016?
Yes, I don't know how far I went into that when we talked about To the Stars Academy, but yeah, I was aware that he was. I mean, I've seen him interviewed about it. Like he'd been getting interested in it for a while, and kind of built up to him starting the academy or whatever.
Right. He wrote, actually, it's a very, very large book in 2016 called Secret Machines. Mm-hmm. And actually, when he founded the academy a year later, the initial goal was actually, people don't remember this, was to build a UFO.
I don't remember that. Was that the original goal?
And it still kind of is the goal. They have scientists and stuff on their goal is to figure out what this phenomenon is and then build it ourselves.
Interesting.
And he said, if the government's not going to do it, I'm going to do it on my own. Now, one overlooked story. So again, he publishes this thing in 2016. 1 year later, he founds this thing. He immediately gets this very high-ranking intelligence spook. Let's call it what it is. Elizondo's a spook.
Yeah.
Who immediately hops on board. 2 months after that, we have 3 UFO videos, and we've announced this task force that's been dripping all this stuff off. One overlooked story about the To the Stars Academy is that in October of 2019, Tom DeLonge and the Academy signed a $750,000 contract with the U.S. Army to assist in its research.
Really?
Yep, you can Google it. So they've actually, for about half their existence now, they've been in collaboration in a 5-year contract with the military to share stuff that they find.
Well, that muddies the waters even further on what's going on and who knows what.
Oh, yeah, it muddies it quite a bit.
That means the government, I mean, because that's been the question the whole I've kind of had, looking into him and stuff, is like, how is he getting away with doing all this? Either I forgot that detail or whatever, but yeah, there's the missing piece. They're funding it. So they're in charge of it to some extent.
Yeah, so the disclosure, let's let things out, is being funded by the military itself. Primarily, the $750,000 is for advanced materials, which is one thing that's leaked since then, beamed energy propulsion, and quantum physics/communications, which are all things that were in the Navy UFO patents.
Yep.
And this led me to another final piece, because I just had to Google it. What was Tom DeLonge doing in between the time he was working on his book and he founded this thing that is now partially run by Elizondo, who has some questionable motives, was being already Black World funded, he admitted, for 5 years before he left this, which is now funded by the U.S. Army. Mm-hmm. What was Tom DeLonge doing? And this led me to the War Zone, one of my favorite journalistic outlets.
What was he doing?
Tom DeLonge's origin story, this is a headline, for the To the Stars Academy, describes a government UFO info operation. Tom DeLonge is either lying and his company can't be trusted, or dark areas of the military-industrial complex had a direct hand in its founding.
Ooh, that's a tough call.
This is from Tyler Rogaway in 2019. He actually wrote this. He wrote this prior to the contract that they signed in October of 2019. This was like June
Okay.
or July of 2019. And it's a very long article. He has full transcripts. This is around the time that the History Channel had this series called Unidentified that was like
Mhm.
a collaboration with the To the Stars Academy. And he actually noted in Tom DeLonge's own interviews and his works that he's for many years now told a very consistent story about how he got interested in this and how he formed it. He says one of the most fascinating but seldom discussed elements of this whole story of the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences came to be, and who the mysterious people were that had a direct hand in making it a reality. Even by its principal founder's own bizarre yet highly detailed account, which you will read in full in a moment, it sounds far more akin to the making of a tightly controlled government information and psychological operation than the result of a group of highly qualified people who were interested in accessing new insights on the subject of UFOs. Now, I'm just going into the summary of this, but they have this is one of the longer, and it's very interesting. I'm just going to read some segments here so we can react to it. Tom DeLonge's own story is that he reached out to Skunk Works with interest in collaborating on a documentary focused on secret machines. This is back when he was working on his book and advanced development projects. Multiple members of Skunk Works team met with DeLonge to explore his vision for the documentary, as we would with any individual or organization interested in telling the story of Skunk Works and the technologies we've developed. We ultimately decided to not move forward or participate in the documentary. During the exploration period, DeLonge attended a Skunk Works employee event. After the meetings at Skunk Works, Tom himself claims to have met with top officials at NASA, the Air Force, the U.S. intelligence apparatus, and the highest rungs of U.S. politics, all of whom worked cooperatively to provide him with a highly qualified team of deeply entrenched government insiders to help direct his efforts and to supply him with what can only be considered amazing information. That information would be doled out piece by tiny piece, and the release of it to the public would be tightly controlled under strict terms.
Which seems
Tom,
like what's happening.
that's exactly what's happened. And he himself admits, like, oh, I was meeting with all these people when I was working on this book, and I was talking to Skunkworks, and I was talking to Lockheed Martin, and I was talking to this politician, and they told me they give people to my. So Tom elaborates on his pitch to the powers that be, in which he notes that the military industrial complex had been painted in a very bad light over the years, with its image being degraded massively within the public sphere, and especially among millennials. He went on to explain how he and the entity he wanted to create could change these perceptions and even help with plausible deniability as the information he was given slowly trickled forward. Amazingly, DeLonge says that the officials that agreed to help him thought that the timing was just right for this type of very suspicious arrangement. In all, one can easily, if not undeniably, read his own story as the government assembling a novel non-governmental information platform that sits somewhere between credible and questionable credibility, and that can work to directly mold the public's perception of the UFO phenomenon and defense industrial complex.
Man, that just sounds like so many things they've done throughout the years, like as far as like disseminating information. Like we'll give you like 8 lies and one truth. And you gotta figure out which one the truth is, but we technically told you the truth. It's in there
Yeah,
somewhere.
I think the question is To the Stars Academy basically the military?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It's their outlet for disseminating information the way they want, through a name that people know. It's a weird move. It's a very weird move all around.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if he met them while he was working on the book, or if they approached him first. Well, they probably saw that he had interest and saw a use for him.
Hmm.
And I want to do more research into this area. Again, I encourage everyone to go read that Warzone report, because again, this was just the summary since we're going along here. But I, man, I kind of think the whole thing might be disinformation. I don't know. I don't know to what extent or how much of the information is real or why they're doing this now. It still begs the question, why now?
Yeah.
But it definitely, there's nothing that the To the Stars has come out with that the government hasn't eventually confirmed.
Yep.
It seems to be their tool to put the little breadcrumb out there, see how people react, and then admit it next. So we'll keep watching whatever To the Stars does, but at this point, when Elizondo goes on TV and says, "Watch out, they might be from the ocean, they might be interdimensional," that to me seems like the government putting a breadcrumb out there.
Yeah. Kind of prepping everybody and priming everybody for like, so there's some crazy stuff going on at the bottom of the ocean that we don't really know how to do anything about.
Right. And
Or there's
so,
just other dimensions, which is even scarier.
and I guess that's my big takeaway this episode is the government always is disappointing until this organization with questionable ties to it and funding puts the breadcrumb out. So, like, I think we need to start watching Elizondo very closely
Mm-hmm.
because he seems to be the weather balloon that puts out the crazy thing. Which 5 years ago it was, there's a video of UFOs. Oh my gosh, so crazy! Now we have tons of them,
Yep.
and now he's openly saying interdimensional, under the water.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder how many months or years it's going to be before the government says we think it's interdimensional or under the water.
Yeah, it's seeming like based on the pattern so far, that's probably where it's heading next.
Yeah, so that's kind of my little more of a dive into. I thought it'd be disappointing just to do the report, but yeah, I just started wondering. Like, the thing that tipped me off was I never really knew Elizondo's background. I never connected like how close in time, and then I never knew that he himself said he was black funded for like 5 years. And yeah, man, I don't know. I still think something's going to be announced, but I think that we got to watch To the Stars as like the weather balloon, basically, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think that's probably, it seems like he is the primer for whatever they're going to do in the next couple of years or whatever, basically.
What was his title? It was like government projects liaison or something.
Something like that.
It's basically spokesman for the government. Yeah. All right. Well, so that's my research this week. That's what I got, man. That's my thoughts.
Well, I'm glad we went over it. Like, it didn't wow me like I'd hoped it would, but like, it's something. Something's going on. I guess our paranoia will just kind of let our imagination run with it for a little while, which is probably the plan.
Yeah, my bigger story is I no longer trust To the Star. That's my bigger.
Yeah, it does seem like, yeah, they're basically a media outlet for this like super secret part of the government.
Yeah. So, well, thank you everyone for listening. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for getting us through June. Let's look forward to an awesome July. Please like, share, subscribe, send your favorite episode to a friend. Don't forget to comment, and have a great summer. Bye, Pat.
Bye. Love you.